For most of us, we hear the gospel at Mass, and this is the vast majority of the exposure we have to the gospel. And because of that, I think it can be easy to forget that the gospel we read at Mass was written to be read not in snippets, but instead as one complete work, more like a book. And to that end, I think it would be beneficial to all of us if we find some time before the end of the summer to read the full Gospel of Matthew, which we are using this year in 2020. It's really not that long, only about 23,000 words, and that would take 2 to 3 hours to read. I bring this up because during the current time, ordinary time, in many weeks, the gospel from today's Mass will pick right back up where last week's left off. And if we're not careful, we can miss the connections between them. I think you'll find when you do this exercise of reading an entire gospel, you'll see that the parables are not meant to stand alone. They are connected to one another. Last week, we heard the parable of the seeds that fell on different ground. Some ground was fertile and receptive, and God's seeds flourished, where other seeds did not grow on rocky or thorny or otherwise bad ground. In today's parable, Jesus adds a new component. Whereas last week all the seeds were good, now we have a scenario where some of the seeds are sown by the evil one. They are bad seeds. And this is really important and has two consequences. One having to do with ourselves, and the second with how we view others. Regarding ourselves, it's a sign to us that we must not have a blind faith. The devil is very tricky. He does his best to look like God and appear like his ideas are God's good ideas. Because of this, there is a great risk in accepting every seed that comes into our heart as if it were a good seed. That's not the case. Some of them are bad seeds. And unfortunately, if we are not careful, that seed will grow in us. So we have to be simultaneously good, fertile soil for the good seeds. But at the same time, we must be discerning and prevent the bad seeds from taking hold. This is a very humbling thought. Most of us have enough life experience and have made enough mistakes to know that it's not always easy to separate the good from the bad at first. It can take letting those seeds grow in us, and sometimes much longer than we would like, for us to see the destructiveness of the bad seeds. But this brings me to the other way we can look at this parable. We can turn it around and view the field as Christ viewed the field, as the people of society around us. In the field, there are bad seeds and there are good seeds. Instead of just a pure wheat field, we have a field full of both weeds and wheat. And the workers in this parable were quick to want to go out into the field to get at the weeds. They were angry that the evil one had messed up their perfect and pure wheat field. And in their desire to go get the weeds, they were willing to trample on the good fruit. and ruin it as well. But this is not Jesus' reaction. Jesus says, let the field grow with both the good and the bad. He's more concerned with growing the good than extracting the bad weeds. In our society today, there are a lot of things going on that concern us. And in much of it, it is difficult to separate the good from the bad. To use a recent example, parents this week have had to grapple with the difficult decision to close schools again before they've even opened throughout most of the state, including here in Roseville. And this has caused a raging debate amongst parents. Was this decision cowardly or prudent? Some parents emphasize the issues of quality of instruction. Will having the kids learn at home really be ensured that they get the education they deserve? Others emphasize the dangers of allowing this disease to spread even further and are willing to take the educational sacrifices for the larger good of getting a hold of the pandemic. But all of these people, myself included, whether they think it was good or bad for that the decision was made, are tempted towards anger in these moments. We are tempted to go out into the field and attempt to rip out the weeds and not worry about ruining the good wheat while we're doing it. And this is just one example. I could lay out similar battle lines for our indoor masses that have been canceled, for the closing of restaurants and bars, or even the issue of whether mail-in ballots or open polling places for the November election makes sense. And this is where today's gospel is so important, because it gives to us the twofold message of humility and charity. We must remember that it is difficult to make these decisions, and that even when decisions that we might think are wrong are made, it was most likely done with good intentions. And so even when we are confident we think we have the right answers, we must treat those around us, the field, with care. We must avoid striking out with anger and destroying all that is good in our attempt to go after the bad weeds. Instead, we must be like Christ. We must be motivated by love, compassion, charity, not anger. We must be more concerned for the wheat than the weeds.